You're listening to the Drummer Daily Podcast, the only daily podcast dedicated just to drummers. Go to my website at danielhadaway.com. Hey, how's it going? Welcome back again. Today I want to talk with you. What do you say? Talk with someone, talk to someone. Well, I guess I can't hear you talking if you're talking back to me right now, so I guess I'm talking to you. But today I want to talk to you about the topic of, and I was gonna say, maybe I'll just say this. It's what to do if you find yourself as a drummer playing in a band that's not very good. And what I want to talk, obviously, if the band is playing terrible songs or they're just not a good band, that's one thing, and that's not what I'm talking about. I guess I mean more in the sense of like playing in tune or playing in time, kind of the basics of being in a band or things like that. And I'll get a little more specific when I get into this, but really the thing I was thinking about is I've played with a bunch of musicians of all kinds over my years. And when I was really young, I played with some really amazing musicians that I definitely didn't belong on the same stage as. And then all throughout, my career, I've been on the stage with people who some of them were beginners, and they might have felt like they didn't belong on the stage with other people on stage, or they weren't aware of how good or not good they are, or a variety of situations, or they weren't. And I think what I'm trying to get at with this, in general, the type of player I'm talking about is maybe a player who, obviously not a drummer because you're the drummer, but a guitar player, a piano player, or something else. Someone who maybe is not very, definitely maybe not aware of tempo or of feel as far as the things us drummers pay attention to. They're not as aware of those things. And maybe even if they are aware that those are important factors in how they play, that they aren't very aware of how they are doing in that regard. Maybe they're not self-aware. They don't hear themselves playing and understand or perceive that maybe they're not quite doing very well as far as timing or how they're playing with feel. I used to play with, I think it was a bass player who would be out of tune all the time. And I would constantly, I would end up being the one who'd notice and be like, hey, can we fix that? Or he'd be playing the wrong note, and he'd play the wrong note every time. Like we'd go to a chorus and he'd play the wrong note. And it's just be like, how do you not hear that that's not right? Or how do you not notice that your guitar is out of tune? Kind of a basic thing. Now, while I can't really give you any tips for how to tell a bass player his bass is out of tune, what I can do is I can tell you about what to do from a timing and feel perspective when it seems like the rest of the band is not as aware of it as you are. And so let's just use the example of, because this is a common thing, a lot of times acoustic guitar players, they have a pretty rhythmic sounding instrument, and for whatever reason, they always seem to tend, at least in my experience, to want to play a little bit on top of the beat. So a little bit ahead, if you're using a click track, a little bit ahead of the click track. A lot of guitar players actually have decent tempo, the ones I've played with. They just, where they're playing lines up, with the click is always in front of it. So they're not speeding up over time. They're actually playing pretty solid as far as time goes. Just in their relation to where they're hearing the beat, they're playing a little in front of it all the time. And a lot of times, especially like in worship music that I play a lot of times you'll start out with the guitar player playing something first and then everyone else comes in. It just happens that way in the way the songs are arranged a lot. And when that happens, it can always feel like when the drummer comes in all of a sudden that we're dragging. Like if you're a drummer who tries to do things the right way and lay back or play right on the beat, it's going to sound like you're dragging when you come in from an audience perspective, because the audience can't hear the click track. They just hear the guitar player playing and it sounds fine to them. And then you come in, and if you're right on the beat or just behind the beat, like a lot of drummers try to be, it will feel like you're dragging and you slowed the whole thing down, and it kind of loses momentum. So that's kind of part A. So put that in your back pocket for a second, and let's jump over to this other thought, which is, and I might have mentioned this in the podcast before, but when I was in marching band, we would, in marching band, you march around the field, you have all these different like pictures, they call them, like at least we did, like they're formations, like, you might go march into this shape on the field, all the different instrumentalists on the field create a shape, right? Like a circle or a square or something a little more complex. But you all create that shape. And then you hold it for a little bit maybe, and then you move to some other position and you make a different shape. Well, the way we learned that was, they give each person, like me as a drummer, they'd come up to me and they'd say, all right, at this time in the song, or this many beats into the song, your position on the field is this. And they tell you, it's been a long time, but it's, something along the lines of like, you're on the 45-yard line and you're 8 steps above the hash or whatever, because they're like the hash marks on the football field, something like that. And what would happen is, like, let's say you're supposed to be in a straight line, like you're in a square, so there's 4 straight lines, in a square that and everyone had to be on that line. Well, let's say that what we would do is we would march to pictures sometimes, and then we'd check it, and each section leader would come and check each person in, like the drum line, for example, and check to see if you're in the right spot or not. And that was all well and good for practice. You make sure you're in the right spot. And in a perfect world, everyone would go to their exact right spot, and it would all look like a perfect square. Well, in competitions or performance situations, the judges watching, they don't have your picture book out to know exactly where drummer B is supposed to be at this time. Well, he'll look at the overall picture and say, all right, does that look like whatever it looks like they're trying? It's obvious they're trying to make a square on the field. Does that look like a square to me? And they'd say, oh, it looks like drummer B is a little out of line down there. They'd sit up high and look down on the field and see these shapes. Well, what they don't know is that, let's say I'm drummer B, I actually went to the right spot on the field. I'm actually, as far as the rest of the band goes, I'm actually the only one doing it right. Well, when you're performing for an audience or doing something, there's a bunch of people who don't know what's, quote, right or wrong, everyone would look at that formation. They'd see me as drummer B standing in what I know is the right spot, but they'd all see it and say, man, that one guy is ruining that formation. He's actually in the wrong spot. I know that I'm in the right spot. Well, basically that illustrates the idea of what they tell you is in marching band is, if you're the only one doing the right thing. Now, of course, this doesn't go to like morals or anything, but when it comes to marching band and group art, things like this, if you're the only one doing the right thing, you're not doing the right thing. You're the one who looks wrong. You're the one who's wrong. So I guess what I'm saying is, to relate that back to playing in a band where everyone seems like they're not playing as rhythmically aware as you would like or as you are. You have a choice to make. You can, let's say that back to that acoustic guitar player who's playing on top of the beat. When you come in, when it's your time to come in, you have a choice to make. You can start and play behind the beat or right on the beat the way that you want, because it feels good. Your playing will feel good if you do that. And now that I've given you the knowledge to be aware of it, you have no excuse. You should now be aware that if you know that's the case and you choose that path, it's going to sound bad and you're going to sound wrong, and people are going to say, man, that drummer ruined the song. So you have the choice to be right, hold to your principles, but then maybe ruin a song and a worship experience if you're in church maybe. Or you have the choice to go along with it. And you know that you're not doing it, quote, right, that you're playing ahead of the beat. But when you choose to play ahead of the beat with the rest of the band, it actually makes the band sound tighter, and everyone actually thinks it's great. Everyone listening thinks it's great. I always say that there's not, as a drummer, we kind of think that we're like the police of the band sometimes, or we think that we're the because we're not having to figure out chords and stuff. Sometimes we have a lot of free time, so we focus on other things. And we almost sometimes feel like we're the most principled ones in the band. At least that's how I used to think, that I was the only one who knew how it was supposed to be, and I had to make sure everyone else was doing it right. Well, I soon learned that a very important lesson that I learned was it's a performance situation. It's never the right time for you to teach the rest of the band a lesson. We're not the parents of other people in our band, and when push comes to shove and the pressure's on, you have to do what you can do to make the band, be perceived as well as it can be, or make everything feel like it's sticking together as well as you can. So I just want to encourage you. All that was a long roundabout way of saying it's much better as a drummer. You have a lot of power rhythmically to dictate where the band can go. You have a lot of power dynamically to dictate where the band can go. And you have to be aware of that, but also know that you can't be a dictator with your power, that many times the choice you have to make with all of that volume power, dynamic power, rhythmic power is to actually complement and go along with everyone else in the band, even if they're imperfect and they're not doing what you think is right. If you choose to go along and support what they're doing, the end result is actually much better than having 4 people be wrong and you be the only one that's right. So I hope that's helpful for you today. I know that's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I get questions about things like, my worship band's not very good, or such and such player is always doing this or that. Well, this is kind of my response to that. So I hope it helps you out. I hope that if this does apply to you, that you can use it. And I think all of us drummers can use a healthy dose of lay off of it medicine for every once in a while. I know I can. So I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.